going on, guys? So as you can see, we're still in isolation. I've had some free time, and what I've done is I have created a quick video that shows anybody how they can create a podcast absolutely free. And it's covering everything from recording to editing and how you can actually get your podcast onto some of the biggest platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music, absolutely free. The only thing that you would maybe want to invest a little bit of money into would be a decent microphone to get you started, and I'm going to cover that at the end. So if you're looking for tips on how to brand your podcast and how to advertise it, or how to even just create the content that's within your podcast, I'm going to cover that in the next video. For now, this is just strictly how you can get going and start creating the podcast absolutely free today. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay guys, so jumping right in, I'm going to show you how to do everything from recording your podcast all the way to how to upload it and get it out there on some of the largest podcast platforms in the world. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out how you're going to record it. Now, if you are a solo doing the podcast alone, it's very easy. You can use free platforms like GarageBand if you have a Mac, or QuickTime Player, which is what I'm actually using right now. Very simple and allows you to record in a standard MP3 format. Now, if you have a guest and that person is remote and they're not in the same room as you for the podcast, that's when it can get a little bit more complicated, but it's still relatively easy. For those types of podcasts, I've been using a platform called Zencastr for the last year. And these guys are great because they offer an automatic post-production that essentially stitches your audio file and your guest's audio file together to make a really nice audio file once you hit post-production. Now, it's not free. This is really the only thing I'm paying for throughout the entire process. It's $20 a month, but that's 10 hours of post-production, which is more than I'm going to need. You'll have to assess your needs and what you plan on doing, but for me, it's perfect. So just to give you an idea, I did a podcast with a friend of mine, John, last week. He lives in Thailand, and I'm in Canada, so this tool was perfect. We did our podcast, and once you hit post-production, it will generate an MP3 file as well as a WAV file. Now, a WAV file is great for editing, especially if you're doing some high-level editing on like Adobe Audition. So you can download whichever file you prefer. For the purpose of this test, I'll do the MP3 version. Okay, so I've recorded my podcast. Essentially, the hard work's been done. That's where you should focus on really, is the content and what your podcast is really all about. If that isn't good, then there's no point in even doing a podcast. So in terms of editing, like I said earlier, you could get really intense and use like Adobe Audition. There's all kinds of different podcast editing or audio editing software out there. However, again, sticking to the theme of free, I downloaded a tool called Audacity. It's a free audio editing software, and it allows you to do some basic editing that will help you create a better finished product. So I'll just quickly show you some of the things. So if you want to cut certain areas, very, very simple, right? You can zoom in to make it more granular on the parts you want to cut out. If you want to split different audio pieces and maybe you want to grab a sound bite of a specific section of the podcast that was really good, you can do that very easily. You can slow down and speed up certain sections. You can add audio beats if you're trying to make something a little bit more customized. It's pretty cool considering it's free. There's a lot you can do. I'm quite impressed with it. If there's other free tools out there that you know about, please let me know. But for now, this one seems to be working for me. So once you're done, you'll save your file. Okay, so you'll export your file as an MP3. An MP3 is a good file for sharing. Okay, so we'll save it like that. Okay, so we've done that, and now it's time to get your podcast out there for your listeners. I mean, of course, there's all kinds of platforms out there we can use that you can pay for. I mean, there's Buzzsprout, Simplecast, Squadcast. The list goes on and on. The paid versions are great because they do a lot of the legwork for you. However, I will just caution you on some of the free ones. Some of the issues there is, although it's free and they do a lot of the work for you, they essentially take over the production side of things. They actually will run ads against your content, and they're making money off of your hard work. So essentially, when I like to think of it, whenever something's free, you're not the customer, you're the product. So they're going to run ads against your content, and if your podcast gets bigger than you anticipated, and you all of a sudden want to run ads on your own account, it can actually be impossible, or at least very hard to do so. So just a few things to be wary about with the free distribution websites. If you're going to do it, I suggest doing a paid one. But I am going to continue with a free option, which I'm going to show you right now. So, and that's using SoundCloud. You'd probably know SoundCloud. My company, Sales Talent Agency, we use it for our podcast called Great Sales Leaders Know, where we interview sales leaders across North America. So the way we leverage SoundCloud for that is we actually will go to, I'll just quickly show you how it works. So upload, you'd have your file, and you can input your graphics, your title, your description, and everything like that. And then once you hit upload, you'll see it appear under recent. So now your podcast is technically live on an internet platform. You can share a URL to share this specific podcast. This is great if you're using it for internal purposes, but if you're looking to build an audience and get it in front of as many people as possible, you can actually use what's called an RSS feed to share that with platforms like Stitcher and Spotify and Apple Music. And I'll show you how to do that using SoundCloud. So you'll go to the top right and go to Settings, and under Content will be the RSS feed that's been generated. So you'll copy that, and then you'll want to run over to what's called Podcasters for Spotify. Okay, Spotify for Podcasters. You go to your dashboard. You need to have a Spotify account, but it can be the free version. You don't have to pay for Spotify. And you'll hit Get Started, and you will link your RSS feed there. Obviously, it won't work for me. I've already done this, and you can't link the same RSS feed twice. But essentially what would happen is when you put it in, you'll input additional information, and then it goes to an approval process, which takes about 72 hours. But once you're done, your podcast will be live if it's approved, and it will look something like this. You've got your graphics, your title, your information, and your episodes. They'll be posted chronologically. Actually, you can edit that, but for now I've got it set up so that the newest episodes appear throughout. And the process is very similar for iTunes. So again, you'd put in your RSS feed, you would hit validate. It won't work for me. Again, I've already done this. I found iTunes took a little longer to approve. I think it has something to do with the fact that it's a SoundCloud RSS feed and it's technically a free platform. It might be a little bit of a quicker process if you use one of those paid platforms that we discussed earlier, because it's a little bit more legitimate, and the approval probably isn't as rigorous. But either way, it did get approved, and you'll be on iTunes looking like this. Okay, very clean, very standard. So now I've got my podcast on two of the biggest podcast platforms in the world, Apple Music and Spotify. And what I'm going to do next is give you a little bit of information on what kind of microphone you can use, as well as how to prepare your guest to run a really smooth podcast when you invite them on. Okay guys, so as I promised, I wanted to give you a few recommendations for microphones that I have used in the past. There are hundreds of microphone options out there, so don't just watch this video and make a decision. Do your own research and see what's going to be best for you. These are both USB microphones, meaning you can plug them into your computer and get going right away. So the first one is a Shure MV5 USB microphone. It's $128. I used this one a little while ago, and the audio was pretty smooth. I thought it was good for what I was using it for, given the cost. And the only trouble I had with it is the lack of customization, which is why I upgraded to the Yeti Blue, which is $175. You can get it at Best Buy. And it is really great because you can customize the sound directioning. So if it's a solo podcast, I can have the microphone aimed at me and it will capture my audio perfectly. If I'm doing a podcast with multiple people and we're sitting around a table, I can change the audio input settings so that it actually captures audio clearly from a 360-degree perspective. So really great customization. And yeah, like I said, I've been using it for a little while now, and it hasn't let me down yet. So definitely look at those two, and see which one might work best for you. You can, of course, take it more seriously and get like XML microphones. They're going to be the highest quality, and that's what the people that are running large scale podcasts are probably using. The trouble there is that you would have to obviously spend a lot more money. You would need a mixer. You would have to learn how to use all that equipment, and like I said, that's something that you can look at if if your podcast really takes off and you really want to take it to the next level. But these are just a few tips for getting you started. The last thing I want to have a quick chat about is just back to remote podcast recording. You're going to find that as you start to have guests, the majority of the time they're going to want to do a remote podcast. It can be a bit of a pain to have to meet up with somebody just to do the podcast, especially if you're not in the same city or country even. So there's 4 things that I recommend you do that will help you and help your guests to run a really smooth podcast. The first thing is to provide them with a small media kit that includes what your brand is about, what the podcast is about, the tone that you're going for, and some of the key takeaways you hope to get away with that guest. Give them that information. This will help them prepare and help them understand what you're looking to get out of it, so that they can better prepare for when you hit the record button. I suggest sending that to them a week in advance, giving them plenty of time to review it. The second thing you're going to have to let them know is when it comes time to do the podcast, make sure that they're in an environment where the Wi-Fi or the internet connection is strong and consistent. The last thing you want is your guest losing connection midway through the podcast. You have to re-record. It can be awkward and it can be a mess. So just make sure that they're in an environment where they're going to stay connected the whole time, and that way it'll be less editing for you at the end. The second thing is don't expect them to have a state-of-the-art headset at the ready. They don't need anything too crazy. For example, right now this video, I'm just using an Apple headset that you get with any standard cell phone purchase, and I like to think that I sound good enough, at least for some of those intro podcasts. So let them know that they can use a relatively lower quality headset. You can run tests before you actually hit record. But just make sure that they know they don't have to go out and get something super elaborate and intricate. They can just get away with basic quality. And if it's really bad, let them know, and then you can reschedule. But for the most part, anything will work. And the last thing is the room that they choose to do their podcast in. Make sure they're in a room where there's little to no echo and little to no background noise. Again, these are little nuances that when you get to the editing stage, it takes a lot of work to remove things like that. You could do it if you have an Adobe Audition license or anything else that costs a lot of money, but for Audacity, which is the free one I showed you earlier, you're limited to what you can do. So the better quality you can record the podcasts initially, the easier it's going to be for you in the end. Okay, guys, so those are the 4 things that I recommend you provide your guests before you actually start recording. So hopefully these tips will help you out to get started. You can do your podcasts for free or little cost. So if you have any other tips or tricks that you use in your podcasting, please let me know. I'm always excited to learn more. Otherwise, I wish you all the best.